So INFJs and ISFPs, these types are very similar in some ways, but they're also pretty different in some ways. We'll kind of walk through different things about their relationship. They're both NISE users, so that's one similarity. They value things like freedom, creation, the ability to express yourself. They're a little bit different emotionally, but they are feeling types, so they do care about being authentic and being good people. They're emotionally focused in general. They do care about making people happy. They can definitely deal with things like guilt and shame. They can be pretty introverted as well and socially anxious. Both of these types can be a little bit socially apprehensive, so a little bit cautious there, but they do want social connection a lot because they are feeling types, so still pretty important to them, and we'll kind of dive into it. Their primary focus. So ISFPs, their primary focus is on things like authenticity, emotional value, being able to be a valuable person, their self-worth, their self-esteem, how good they are at things, how good they feel about themselves. So that general value is pretty important to ISFPs. That's kind of the pinnacle of their ego, is their value, their emotional kind of ranking in their mind. INFJs are a little different. They're focused more on, an I hero, their individual character, their individual choices, kind of, so it's slightly different. ISFPs, they are focused on that kind of moral character, so they do care about that emotional character. It's not entirely different, but INFJs focus more on that decision-making character. What choices will they make specifically, in analyzing which choices are smarter, trying to understand the right path for them in their future. So one's a little bit more strategic focused and one's a little bit more emotional focused. ISFPs, they do look to make an immediate impact. They care about the present moment, sharing experiences with the people in their life, and having that kind of immediate impact on people, whereas INFJs, a little bit more future focused. INFJs, they want to be an emotional safe place for others, so that's kind of similar. INFJs have a FE parent, so they want to be emotionally safe. They don't want to hurt people. They want to be responsible with their ethical choices, whereas ISFPs, similar. They have extroverted sensing parents, so they want to be responsible with their choices when it comes to people's physical safety and physical well-being. So definitely caring about those things as well. ISFPs, they want to do their own thing. They will have that independent streak. They want to create. They want to have their own freedom. They want to be able to make things with their hands, make things in the physical realm. And they want to express themselves freely, express their emotions in a free way where they're able to do what they want when they want. INFJ is very similar as well, but they also want to be able to speak freely and be more honest. INFJs have TI child, so they really want to be honest and speak freely, speak from their mind, and kind of say what comes to their head. Whereas ISFPs more want to speak with their soul, create, be able to innovate, do what kind of comes to their gut feelings, their gut intuition. So they do want that specific freedom between these two personality types. ISFPs, they want to make an impact on the way people think. They want to change the way people see the world, the way people think things work. They want to do their own research, they do their own, brainstorming, and understand how to influence people's minds, influence what people think about the world. So they might come up and say, "Oh, have you read this article? I've read this article. What do you think about that? I actually understand this data set." So that kind of changes your perspective. So they like to influence the way people think, and in a primary way, they like to make people think highly of them. They want to be good to other people. They want to seem good to other people. They want to seem cool. They want to, have a good reputation so that they can feel good about themselves and feel like they're accepted by the tribe. And so ISFPs definitely connect that kind of desire to make people think a certain way with that aligning with their ego, aligning with their emotional value, aligning with their self-worth, aligning with how they feel about themselves, their identity, and having this identity and this authenticity respected by other people, and they want to influence that in a positive way. INFJs, they want to make a difference on the lives of people. I think make a difference on the life people experience. So in a way, INFJs, they kind of do a similar thing to ISFPs, where they take that hero function, that introverted intuition that makes choices and wants to have individual character that's a little bit different, and they want to have that make a difference in people's lives. They want to know that they made a positive impact, that they made someone's life better, that they, with their choices, with their strategy, with their character, with that kind of gut intuition deciding, was able to make somebody's life better and have that impact. So they want to be able to connect those two functions just like ISFPs do, but slightly different focus between these two types. One focused more on that, perception realm, on that intellectual and emotional realm, and one focused a bit more on that sensory realm and that intuition and that impact. So slightly different there. So we'll go into some of the worries these types have. ISFPs, they worry that others are not as moral as them. ISFPs, moral people, they try and make decisions they believe are good or bad. Of course, that's subjective, but they do try and make decisions based on that. And they want to make decisions that align with their identity, align with their values, align with their principles, and that align with their emotional state of what is good and what is bad. And they're worried that other people don't do that as much as them, which is kind of true. They are feeling heroes. They do it a lot. And so they worry, people probably aren't making as moral decisions as me. People probably aren't, developing their own principles and their own kind of, emotional way of guiding them through life. So they can worry sometimes that people might make mistakes due to not having that function as much as they do. INFJs, on the other hand, worry that other people might not make decisions in the way they do. They might not be as decisive. They might have poor character. They might, make the wrong choice and not think about the consequences and not be as strategic as them. So INFJs are worried that people might not make decisions that align with their character, that people might not make decisions that are good. So both of these types worry about that opposing perspective. But what they worry about is a little bit different there. ISFPs, they desire people to be, or they desire, to be more loyal to the people in their life. They have asset critic. They can be pretty hard on themselves. They can struggle with sometimes being disloyal, if I said that right, disloyal to the people in their life, because they do have that desire to have freedom and independence, and sometimes they go their own way. But they are critical about that to themselves. They want to be more loyal. They want to be able to stick around for people, and they can be hard on themselves, and they expect that really high degree of loyalty. They think that's important, even if they have a hard time following it sometimes. INFJs, slightly different. They desire to be more moral. They desire to develop their own values, even though sometimes they go with what people feel because they're FE users, or they may make more strategic decisions that aren't factoring in what they feel. They do desire to be more emotionally focused and have those authentic values as well and prioritize them. And they can be really hard on themselves and hold themselves to a very high standard of moral character. So both of these types, have that hidden desire, even if it's something they might struggle with because of their other functions. And we have the things they disregard, things they don't care about, their lowest two functions. ISFPs, they don't care that much about potential consequences, about what other people are going to do. They're more focused on themselves, what they're doing, what they're going to do. They're not necessarily worrying too much about what if this, so this person might do that, and then if that person does that, someone else might do something else. They think it's all theoretical. They don't want to worry about it too much. They want to live in the moment. They'll respond in the moment. They'll take care of whatever happens, and they like to have that perspective. INFJs, on the other hand, don't really care about being thought in a certain way, so they have that disregard when it comes to what people think about them. They think, if something's true, it's true, and whether people believe it or whether people think it or not, it's true, and I don't care too much about my perception or reputation because perception is changeable. Things can always change. People can think differently. The truth is all that really matters, because even if people think something wrong, eventually the truth will probably come out, and it's just not all that important to them. So they have that kind of disregard attitude towards that. ISFPs, they don't necessarily care if they share their thoughts all their time. While deep down they do want to be able to do that, and everybody does want to use all the 8 functions deep down, they don't necessarily need to all the time express what they think. They don't feel the need to necessarily be super critical of people, because deep down they're afraid of being criticized. They're afraid of being called out and hurt in their feelings. So they don't always want to necessarily, criticize and hurt people's feelings either, because they're worried it might come back at them. So they can be hesitant to bother sharing that. And INFJs, it's the same thing. They don't always want to share their feedback, their experience, because deep down they're afraid that people are going to have a bad experience with them. And if they suddenly share, oh, I'm uncomfortable, or I'm cold, or I'm not having a good time, they're afraid someone might say that back. They just don't necessarily prioritize their own experience. So both of these types are fast to disregard these things for themselves. And then in a relationship between an INFJ and an ISFP. So both of these types are introverts. They can be shy, but they can connect on an emotional level. They're both high feeling types. INFJs have that high FE, ISFPs have that high FI, so that's perfectly compatible. I mean, they're slightly different, spots. ISFPs with FI hero, INFJs FE parent, so it's a slight difference there. But for the most part, pretty darn good. So INFJs can definitely communicate emotionally. They can, be able to help the ISFP open up, share their feelings, share their identity, and they can give them positive feedback, and they can give them approval, and they can make them feel better about themselves. Whereas ISFPs can share their gratitude and their appreciation and their intimate feelings, and have the INFJ respond very positively to that. So then the ISFP can value and rank the INFJ highly, and then the INFJ can be happy because they're ranked highly. And so that ranking system is pretty compatible between them, which can work in a friendship or relationship. So that kind of works. And then from an intellectual standpoint, they have some compatibility as well. INFJ is able to share their thoughts, able to be careful with what they say, not too critical, but a little bit honest here and there. Whereas ISFPs are receptive to that. They appreciate the honesty. They want that truth from other people, but they don't want too much. They don't want too much critical thinking. They want somebody who's a little bit diplomatic, a little bit able to soften the blow. So there's a good compatibility in how they interact with each other. And so, yeah, there's a lot of shared traits, but there are some incompatible traits when it comes to that sharing. So both of these types want freedom, they want independence, but if they're both in a relationship, they can both want a little bit more freedom, and that can sometimes cause a bit of a conflict between them if they're both too independent from each other. They're both very introverted, so they can sometimes, have a difficult time who's going to initiate, who's going to necessarily reach out, so that can be a potential problem. So that's one thing. And then from the extroverted sensing standpoint, they can have a difficult time being obligated. They don't necessarily want to be told what to do, whereas the other type might try and give them advice, tell them what to do, try and help them. And sometimes they can feel a little bit of opposition there. But overall, they both want to have a good time. They want to be nice to each other. They're feeling types. They want to get along. They both want to give a good experience to each other. And so they can work pretty well in a relationship from that perspective. Definitely more focused on relationships that aren't necessarily as high stakes, so they can have a difficult time in intimate relationships. If it's a couple, that can be difficult for very specific reasons. They don't have a lot of the sexual compatibility, physical compatibility. They can have a difficult time. INFJs have very low SI. They don't always like being touched, but they like to touch. Anyways, I could get into that when it comes to a very specific type of relationship, but overall, good relationship, good friendships, good working relationships, from in school. There's lots of relationships where this can be good, but some potential problems at the highest level of relationship. Doesn't mean you can't work through them. It's just they might come up. So yeah, very, very similar types in a lot of different ways. They're independent, they're introverted, they like to have their own freedom, they like to create something, make an impact on the world that's positive, live true to their values and authenticity, and be a good person. So they're very similar in that way. But they can sometimes both kind of stay in the background and be chill, have a good time, be nice, not always wanting to put themselves out there and be super in the center of attention all the time. They do occasionally want that, though. They can judge the other person's weak points because of some of that incompatibility. INFJs may see ISFPs as a little risky. Like, oh, you don't care about the consequences, you're just doing what you want. You gotta be a little bit more cautious. And ISFPs may see INFJs as being a little bit weird. They're not always following those normal conventions and doing what, they're supposed to do. They're a little outside of the box and abstract, and they might see them as a little heady and impractical. So these types can sometimes judge each other if they're thinking that way. But these types are often able to still emotionally connect, feel that safety with each other, and stay close in a relationship in a relative sense, but sometimes there's a little bit of a barrier to those deeper connections between these types in some of the different ways. So that's kind of the INFJ ISFP relationship. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this relationship, if you've experienced it, or if you disagree with anything I said, if you think anything about these two types. So thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, please subscribe down below as it helps the channel, and I hope you all have a great day.